Boom, boom. How's it going? How's it going? Welcome aboard. It is I, TJ, and welcome back. And as it is, we bring you untold stories, stories of people that are killing it in their own space. So you are listening to M5, Successful Friends. And if this is your first time, where have you been? And if it is your second, third time, welcome aboard. And as it is usual, we've got a guest, and my guest today is Beulah. I had the opportunity of meeting Beulah, and I've had an opportunity to kind of like zoom in into the work that she does, and it blew my mind. Up to now, I cannot contain myself, and up to now, it's one of those things I have had a small little dream of, but she's already doing it in today's world, and that's why she is here. And it is my honor and my privilege to welcome Beulah. Beulah, welcome aboard to M5 Successful Friends.
Thank you so much for the invite. I hope we're going to enjoy this. Yeah.
Definitely. So Beulah, where are you from? We always start by wanting to know the individual before we jump onto the numbers and all the deals and all of those things. Where are you originally from? And yeah.
Okay, so my story. Well, I'm originally from Pretoria. At the moment, I'm staying in Cape Town. And
So I'm going to drop in here something that we always drop in for people that move to Cape Town.
Yes.
So we always say that people that have moved from Johannesburg, from Pretoria, or any of the inlands to go to Cape Town, we say, well, those people have now arrived financially. Because they are now conscious. They are now conscious that the inland, it's more populated, it's more of a lifestyle. So you're one of those people. Welcome aboard.
I'm glad that I've arrived. I've been here for 6 years already, so 6 or 7. So
Good.
It's not as if I've just arrived. But yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for telling me that I've arrived. Yeah. So I think what is important is my story is quite. I think my story is quite different than most of your people that you might be interviewing, because I'm actually not. I didn't set out to be a property investor. I'm an educational psychologist. I did my doctorate in neurodevelopment.
Yeah.
I have a private practice where I assess children on the autistic spectrum, and I assist them there. I've opened, and I always had a dream. So when I had my private practice, I would see a lot of parents, struggling with their children at home, and I would give them a home-based program and then expect them to actually do that home-based program at home. And we were actually just speaking about, doing things at home.
Yeah.
But I realized pretty soon that my parents are working parents. They are struggling to balance, their work and doing the program that I wanted them to do. And this program needs to be done every single day for the children actually to have the benefit.
Right.
So then I started to dream. And I think that is perhaps the first thing you asked me, have 3 tips available, have 3 tips. I think the first one is to dream.
Yeah.
So I started to dream about having my own school, and I didn't think it's going to be possible, but I was hoping and, keeping this dream alive. And then the moment the opportunity arose for me to actually have a school, I jumped on it. And it came about by the means of one of the parents of the children that I was seeing, a grandparent actually, and he made a property available for me so that I could start the school. And the way he made it available really in my mind started to create an awareness that it is actually possible for me to own the building.
Right.
And that's perhaps my second component. There might be a lot of people here with a skill that is not property, like a hairdresser or we all have our skills that we have. And so I then first rented from this grandfather, and when I reached the number of children that I actually needed to buy my first property, I started to search. And again, that was quite a steep learning curve, because it's not just a normal building that I was looking for. I needed to do my investigations in terms of the possibility to gain consent use. I had to look at the neighborhood. I had to look at the traffic impact studies. And, you know, there are a lot of things involved when you're looking at a school property specifically. But I found a property. I liaised with the municipality, and I very cautiously and with great anxiety bought my first property. But the nice thing in terms of how I went about it is I already had, I waited for the break point. So I rented until I had enough money, and a certain portion of my school fees went towards the property. So I was almost secure from day one, and that is why my story might be different than others, because I'm renting for myself, and I have the legal things in place and the businesses in place, which I've set up consequently. You know, after that, I've set everything in place.
Yeah.
But as an example now, so now we're in lockdown. Say now I have four properties that I'm using exclusively for schooling, and by now it's obviously quite a nice portfolio with quite a hefty bond payment associated with that. But the nice thing,
I want to pause you there, Beulah.
yeah,
Because now you have just jumped from this one particular property that the grandfather.
yes, yes,
And this grandfather here, I just want us to zoom in a little bit on that, because I think sometimes opportunities are there, and
yes,
sometimes we don't see them, and sometimes opportunities, we actually have to dig into them for them to materialize.
yes, you're right.
So
Yeah.
my understanding is that you were practicing at this time.
In terms of?
So you were already practicing in your own business, and
Yes.
and then this grandfather, were you related to the grandfather in terms of maybe
No.
practice perspective? Not at all.
No. So no. So these were, so I had a group of parents whose children wanted a school,
Okay.
and I said, well, I don't have a property. And
Yeah.
one of the grandparents then actually said, well, I have a property. You can rent this property from me. And I started in that way.
Okay.
He was extremely lenient in terms of I had to pay 500 Rand per child that I had towards the property.
Wow.
Bond. He was, and I think breaks like this doesn't always arrive.
Yes.
But it's like you said, we have to be open, and when something like this, you know, pops up, to be ready actually to action, because I was within 3 months.
Right.
I've actioned, and 3 months after that, the school opened.
Wow.
So yeah, it is. It's having the dream is the one thing, and a lot of people have dreams, but the other component is when the opportunity arrives to actually take the step, because a lot of people are then, yes, a lot of people are then afraid to take the steps. And I just thought, well, I've got nothing to lose, and my passion is such that it will actually drive me forward. So and I mean, I within a year's time, I was able to purchase a property.
Right.
So it's starting the business, and in my case, it was getting to know the business model actually, and that 12 months allowed me to model what I wanted to do and to see whether or not this is viable and feasible. And that also gave me the book. So obviously, when you go and you apply for a bond, you know, you need to show your figures, and that allowed me to show the figures. Because another thing in my case specifically, banks do not like to give money to schools and old age homes
Yeah.
because it looks bad when they have to foreclose. So I really had to motivate, and initially I had to get that first bond in my private name, because they didn't want we didn't have a name yet, and we didn't really, I mean, we had only 12 months worth of books. So, but that allowed me to purchase my first property.
Yeah.
And then 3 years after that, I purchased my second property, which was just adjacent to the initial one, so that I could
Okay.
expand my business. And then you
And
won't
where
believe,
was this physically?
in Pretoria,
Okay.
in Linwood.
Right.
Yeah. And we are still there, and the property is still. And the other thing I must say, which worked to my advantage, was the fact that I selected my properties very specifically.
Mm.
So I'm in a very nice area. I'm in opposite Menlyn Shopping Centre.
Okay.
So there's it's a good location
Right.
for
So which
future.
means that your properties are appreciating as well.
Yes,
Plus you're working in the property.
yes.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and it means I have a plan B and potentially a plan C. So if anything goes, if anything happens with the business, then I have a plan B for my property business.
Correct.
And the first thing that I would do is I would convert it into student housing because of its location. And then a part of that, my plan C would be to start to develop it, because it is in a zone that actually will be developed eventually. So I know that I've got long-term views in terms of the property itself, and it is in a way secure.
Okay, good. Beulah,
Mm.
you talk of something that I am always saying to the guys, or should I say something that I personally say.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is learn fast, start small,
Yes.
and grow
Yeah.
fast. Right.
Yes.
And if I listen to your story of actually how you started off,
Mm.
you were not so sure whether your business plan is going to work because you'd never done it before.
Mm. Yes.
And and there was an opportunity for you to go and rent. So which meant that if it didn't work, you could
Yes.
press the eject button nicely and you are not
Definitely.
married. So you're not
Yes.
married to this thing, right?
Yeah.
But you gave it your all to make sure that it works.
Yes.
And then,
Absolutely. You can't go half-hearted in.
correct. And then,
Mm.
boom, it worked. At what point, from your perspective, did you start think that this was now a business?
I think when I opened up my second campus,
Okay.
which I didn't really plan, and I'll tell you the story about that as well. So at the end of 2016,
You know why I'm laughing?
yeah, 12, yeah.
You're almost 2 years into this. It is working, and you're like, I didn't plan it.
No, but I mean, I didn't plan a second campus.
Yeah.
So things were really going well, and I was extremely, things, I mean, there was great demand for what we were doing, and we delivered a good product in terms of the educational components.
Right.
And we were happy and settled. It was a business that was ticking over nicely. So in a sense, I had two businesses that were actually ticking over nicely. And then at the end of 2012, I thought I'll take a short sabbatical
Okay.
and come to Cape Town and just rest for 3 months, because it was quite intense, setting up a school and all of that. So I arrived on the 6th of December in Cape Town for 3 months.
Right.
Before Christmas time, I already identified the property and I started to negotiate because it was just such a nice property. And then, then I realized, well, this is quite possible for me to actually run 2 campuses, and the 3 month also allowed me to see whether or not I can run the other one remotely. I
Right.
had a principal there, but I wanted to see whether or not the model would be working, and it worked. So I then pursued the second campus property. It took me a year to obtain that property, but I knew what I wanted.
Right.
And then we opened up our second campus in 2014.
Okay. I'm gonna take you back again to where you're starting off,
Yes.
and for a lot of us, just starting off, that's where the problem is. So now you're renting, and all right. So
Okay.
so now you're renting, and the business, that's your first campus, right?
Yes.
You're trying it out. It's your recipe book, and now you got it working. And now you've got the next one, which is now where your first campus was. Did you close off the one that you were renting, or you continued, or you just
No. When I rented, I had a contract, and that contract came to an end.
okay?
So, and then part of that was the fact that I bought the first property, bought the second property, so
Right.
that those 2 properties were running, and then I bought the third property in Cape Town.
Okay. Awesome. You speak of 2 businesses in your business. You, what do you mean you've got 2 businesses?
So you're going to laugh now if I explain this to you, but and that's why I said I didn't come into properties the same way other people come into properties.
Sure.
My heartfelt desire was schooling, to
Right.
provide a schooling setup for children who cannot go to mainstream. And for almost 10 years, my total focus was just on that. Um, and it was as if the property was just something I had to do to actually have the school.
Right.
And then the realization came about, oh, wait a minute, so I have the school business, but actually I have a totally other business as well, which is properties. And that is when I started to realize, um, I actually have I actually have 2 businesses. So it wasn't by design,
Yeah.
but now in hindsight, there was a lot of lessons learned, and there's a lot of opportunity to teach other people in terms of, if they have a passion for something like a baker, or
Yeah.
if a hairdresser, or whatever, there's opportunities to do what you're passionate about, and to alongside that have this passive income component. Because for the 10 years that I've just been focusing on the school, the bonds were being paid.
Right.
I was accumulating, wealth there in a way that my focus wasn't there. It
Right.
was totally passive.
Right.
And it's only in the last few years that I've really started to look at these 2 independent from one another, and to see, okay, well, how do I work with both of these and alleviate, get the leverage from one and the other, and work like that. And in my mind, I've got a fantastic model, because it is risky. There's a risk involved, because I have all my eggs in one basket. But as I've also explained, the type of properties that I'm selecting, I know that I have a plan B and a plan C if my core business, if the school doesn't work out, or if there's any problems with the school. So
Yeah.
so what makes it nice now, as an example for what we are experiencing now with the lockdown, other property investors might not know what the status is of their tenants' financial status. I know exactly.
You're sleeping with the enemy.
So in other words, I now know how to work this, so that it can work for both of us, so that both can stay afloat for
Yeah,
as long as possible. So
yeah.
in a sense, it does help me. But you've got to be cautious and careful. Um, but yeah, well, you've asked my story. That's my story.
A lot of people don't know what you've just explained now.
Mm.
I'd never seen anyone doing it. The only other person that I'd seen doing it was McDonald's.
Yes. Well, I had a McDonald's sort of like thing in my head, but at one point I totally just focused on the school and
Yeah,
just accumulated properties to to be able to provide what I wanted it to provide. I must say, and I'm planning a third, I want a third and a fourth and a fifth campus,
right.
definitely. And once
Which
again, when I
bug is
select
bitten you here? The education bug or the property bug?
both,
Nice.
um, and I will continue this model because the model is working, and the model
Oh,
is
yeah.
working for me, and it's working for providing a real service. This is a service that's needed. So, and no one else is providing or standing in the gap. So
Yeah,
it's a service that's needed, and I have the model to be able to scale this.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So now again, I will use the same principles. I'll select um, very good properties in terms of
yeah,
their location.
yeah.
And then it is the McDonald's model. Yeah.
100%. So, Beulah, a lot of this comes through, when we're talking about the actual properties that you're buying, right? They are not, you're buying in residential, and
Yes.
yet for a school to run in a residential area, there's a bit of compliance that is needed.
Yes.
Um, what are the top 3 compliance that you actually need to run a school?
Yes.
Um,
So I'm
your,
glad you mentioned it. You can't just buy any property. So first of all, it must be residential, and then when you look at the title deed itself, or not the zoning component, you must see whether or not in that there is a clause so that you can apply for consent use. Because if that is not stated, then you're going to have a problem. So that's the one component. Then obviously you go through the process of obtaining consent use. But
right,
another very big thing is transport, and they will actually not give you consent use if you cannot comply in terms of the transport. So they will do transport impact studies, and those things are costly, and also stormwater um, reports, things like that.
mm-hmm.
So when you look at a property, it's best to look at a property that's almost, I don't want to say on a main road, but on a road that has got access. So a lot of your parents is going to have a drop off and, go type of scenario. So your property must be able to have an in and an out,
Right,
different in and outs, actually. That's what they prefer. Um, and then what I did with both my locations initially is I've identified properties that I liked. And then before I purchased, I went to the municipality and I asked them whether or not they would consider, because obviously they won't tell me whether they will give me consent, but I wanted to know whether or not they would at least consider consent use, because otherwise I'm not going to put in an offer to purchase, because then I've purchased a property which they would not even consider. So
okay,
there's always the risk that you won't get consent use. But if you do your homework up front, and know, like, it's always good to be close to a shopping center or close to a church, because then they have already established the type of community surroundings, so it's always easier to do that. But the main thing that could potentially block any person to apply for consensus for a school would be traffic.
Okay. And have you ever hit luck where you actually just find a property that has all the compliance in place?
That is, yeah, that is like a needle in a haystack. But if you if you get those,
Yeah.
definitely it would be easy, and it would allow you to open up the school quicker and therefore have an income quicker and provide a service quicker. So there are some properties like that. I mean, there's pre-primary schools that comes up for sale often. So it is possible to.
All right. So whilst we're having this conversation, right, Beulah, I just want to get an understanding from your personal perspective, right? So now you've got this business going, and you've always just wanted to become an educationist, and now, boom, there's another part of the business, which is property, and now you now have a understanding of how it works. You like it, and you now recognize that there's two businesses that you're running. How then did you get into the property space for you to actually realize that there is value here? And out of that value, what actually does it basically mean for you to be in the property space?
Yes. Do you know what? Attending, I've then realized that as much as I spend time looking at my educational business, I have to spend the same amount of time in educating myself in the property business.
Okay.
So I then got a property coach. I started to attend SAPN, and started to educate myself in how to best, use this, because the way I've set up the business, the properties might not have been 100%. Now, if I go back, I mean, I've learned a lot through my own process. The next property that I buy will be bought in a different way and by means of a different mechanism.
Okay.
But I can only say that now because I've started to educate myself around properties. And that happened when I really started to look at the fact that, well, this is it's a whole separate business. I, for a long time, looked at those two as one. And the moment I separated the two in my mind, I realized that there's so much value in looking at the property business as a separate unit and therefore leverage. And that is why it's based on the strategic way that I've worked around that I've entered the SAPN competition, as you would know. So that now allows me, the way I've structured it allows me now to actually go and scout for my third campus. Because I've restructured and I positioned it in such a way that there's, I'm realizing the equity in the properties, which will allow me to grow my property portfolio. And alongside growing the property portfolio, I'm growing my school base as well.
Okay. I just want to give rough figures and numbers here, so that we can have a perspective of what we're talking about. Because for me, if you've got a McDonald's, you go and buy a property here for, I don't know, 5 million, whatever the case is, and that's maybe that little shop. But from an income perspective, there's potentially, I don't know what is a good McDonald's numbers in terms of their income per month. But if we had to look in today's world, if we had to look at numbers of saying a property like in Linwood, we're talking 2 to 3 million, maybe, give or take. So you got a good size.
I was very fortunate because I bought 14 years ago. So you must understand these properties are, so there's a lot of value because there was a lot of time.
Of
I
course,
think
yes. Yeah.
a lot of people need to understand that property relies on time.
As well, yes.
So when I bought the first property, it was 1.4 million.
Right.
The second property was 1.5. And last year, both of them have been evaluated for, I think, 3.5. If we start to do development in that area, they're probably going to go for 5 each.
Okay.
Just to give you an understanding. But time in property is your friend.
100%. Now, for the, if I look at your model, and I understand both from the education and how you're buying. So I'm buying for 3 million. Potentially I could, because I'm now adding a value and a service on the same property. It's no longer about getting rental income. So the service is now a separate business. And this business here could be giving me on a monthly basis, for argument's sake, right? Let's just say 150,000, but I still have other expenses and so on that I need to take. Once that property has been rezoned for commercial, immediately.
You don't need commercial. You don't need commercial for schools, but yeah, if you have a different business, then obviously, yeah.
Right. So immediately that particular property's value shoots because of the income that it's got.
Yeah.
And my question was going to come back to you, which was you probably have answered now, to say, do you need, if you get consent, now when you're looking at your books for the property, you know, does it also follow the same process in the commercial with what you have seen now?
Okay, so yeah. Okay, so as I was saying, I think it's important for people to learn from my mistakes because I didn't do it right in the beginning.
Right.
In the beginning, my only requirement was the school to pay the bonds, and that's why I forgot about it. Pay the bonds, and you know. And then as I started to realize, but I need to look at the property business as I'm looking at the school business, I then restructured and actually started to ask market-related rentals.
Okay.
So in a way, you are right. The moment you should treat both businesses as businesses and not see the one helping the other one, because that is what I did, and that is how I was able to actually manage and maintain the schools. But now the schools are, you know, at a place where they actually can and should pay market-related fees. So in a different sector, say any other sector where you have the business, you know, the front-facing business like the bakery or the hairdresser or whatever, make sure that you set up these things in the right way so that that your books are actually accurate in terms of what it should be. So say you are going to rent a place, how much are you going to pay for that? Pay yourself exactly that same amount of money. Keep it market related so that your property business reflects the value that it should get in, and your other business actually pay the rental which it should.
Right.
That makes sense.
It does, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Beulah, if you had to go into the crust and bolts of your current business, the educational business, with what you now know now, and I come in and I say, hey, I'm a property investor, would you recommend one to just focus on the one and then they get someone like you to come in on top and work the business? Or do you recommend your route, which you took, which was an educationist, and you looked for the tools? Property was one of the tools that you needed, and you ran with it. With what you have learned now over the last couple of years in 2 different cities, one individual,
I think now, because I've split the 2 businesses, remember they were so enmeshed, I myself was confused. The
Right.
fact that I've split the businesses now makes it so much easier to conceive of a model where where and this is now true for myself or for anyone else. Say I come across a property investor that tells me, do you know what, I can give you 10 properties in 10 different cities. Will you rent, and we negotiate a market related rent that works for everybody.
Yeah.
Then I know that I've got the business systems to actually go and run it. I can do that.
Great.
I myself can actually now go and obtain, I can now also be that property investor, go and scout and look for appropriate properties, and then come to my educational business, because I have a business partner now,
Yes.
and say, well, I've got properties, are you interested?
Yeah.
So the nice thing about my position is I can be both. But I now realize also that a person starting doesn't have to have both. They can, through obviously their networking process, or being in the right place at the right time and attending the right things, can potentially land that property investor that's willing, that understands. Because there's another thing about schooling that I don't think a lot of people understand. I'm a secure tenant. A school is a secure tenant, because
Sure.
I'm not going to, the moment I get consent use on my property, I'm not going to move properties again.
Of course.
I'm going to stay there for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't just move a school. So in a way, having a school as a tenant is slightly risky, because it's a school. But on the other hand, they are there to stay. You can almost sign a 20-year rental contract, because it's a school stay.
Yeah.
Obviously, then you have to have the skill set to run the school in such a way that you are maintaining the school. So that's a totally different conversation. But for property investors that's looking into, because it's a nice thing, you buy the property and you sit on the property. It's a nice model for an investor as well. If you have the right things in place, then
Because your
to
income is
have a
almost
school.
guaranteed. You can project it
Exactly.
nicely.
Yeah. And for example, as a school, you always lose the one, you lose children, but you gain children. That's always this play. It's not as if you lose a client, you lose your business.
Yes.
So there's always this forward moving in terms of schooling, and if you know how to run it, then for a property investor, it's almost a secure tenant.
Right. Beulah, I've met you, and you're an amazing person just to hang out with.
Thank you.
And what you do is important to the population. It's important to families, because obviously if someone is not educated in a family, that family is doomed in some one way or the other. And you're providing these two great services. And I am always of the belief that my background and who I am or who I was should not limit me growing or getting to the dream that I want to get to.
Yes.
If you look into your journey, what are the things that you can say, you know what, TJ, one or two things was my roadblocks that I had to overcome. Because I hear some people say, well, this is not for me. This is not, I'm a man. This is not for me. I know I'm female. This is not for me because it's just male dominated. And I'm always seeing that as a self belief that I've got that is blocking me from doing what I'm actually maybe supposed to do. Your work is amazing, like super amazing. But what are some of the things that Beulah herself had to take away, because this was like almost 20 years when you started off, and even up to now, there are not so many people, female, males, that actually have a school that they run, which is their own. What have been some of the limiting beliefs, if you had any, that you have had
Yeah,
to, that Beulah
yeah.
had to stand outside and say, hey, Beulah, you're talking nonsense. This is going to work.
Yes, yes, definitely. And I had a lot because, as you said, this is, I mean, we're in our 14th year. So when nowadays private schools, there are a lot of private schools, but when
Right.
I started, there were almost none.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of people told me, you will not make it.
Right.
It cannot be done. So normal people in my life told me it cannot be done. And then when I went to the bank and they told me, you know what, we don't give money to schools, private schools and old age homes,
Yeah.
you know, and I had to find ways to make them give me the money, you
Sure.
know, and to show them that, you know, this is possible. So tenacity, I believe you must believe so much in your dream, um, that you just go forward, you just forge forward. So tenacity is definitely, I think, something that entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs, have tenacity.
Right.
But definitely, I was told in my face that it will not work.
And here you are 14 years later, it is working.
Yes,
And
and we've helped thousands of children. That's the main thing. Is that properties gives me
yeah,
the platform to do what I really love doing. So I love properties, make no mistake. I love properties.
yeah,
But it allows me, it's my tool, it's my key to actually do and make a difference in, as I've said, thousands of children's lives that otherwise might not have had the opportunity to have a schooling that focuses on neurodevelopment. We're the only one of its kind in South Africa. Probably, I don't want to say in the world, but that I know of in South Africa.
well, you were with Dr. Fielder at the time, and I
That's
think that
right.
was my first time seeing you actually. Um, and now you're being having conversation with such great people.
Mm.
And yet you started off on the back here where people were telling you it can be done. Explain that feeling to me.
Well, if I look back, I sometimes have to pinch myself.
Yeah,
Um, and you know what? We must just trust that inner voice that we've got, that
right,
that the knowing that we are here to do something that's special.
right,
And not everybody, I mean, special means or something of significance, you know. The moment you step out of your comfort zone, I believe you are a person of significance. And we must just um, trust that inner voice and just say, you know what, I know what is truth for me, and just do it, man,
cool.
and
I'm
have fun.
excited. I like that. Just do it. Yes.
Yeah, just
Um,
do it.
good. In closing, Beulah.
I think what I
Um,
wanted to say, sorry, Ty, is it's all right to be scared,
okay,
but do it despite being scared.
that's powerful.
Hmm.
Yeah. I am scared about 90% of my day.
Because you have a lot of properties that you have to manage. You see, I take on only what I can handle.
But I do it anyway.
Yeah, that's good. You do it anyway.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I enjoy it. Beulah, it's been great having you on the show.
Fantastic.
And in the midst of having multiple technological issues, but we closed it off. So thank you very much. And if anyone is wanting to understand your model of business and how it's done in Edu Excellence, Should we just drive them through to the website? All the
Yeah,
information
not
is there?
yeah. My private which would be drbeulah.co.za.
drbeulah.co.za. Okay.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
I'm going to take that one, and that's the one that we're going to do. It's an amazing business. I like it personally.
Thank you. Are you
I
going
want
to
to say,
invest?
yeah, one day when I grow up, I'll be like you.
Good.
Thanks a lot,
Good.
Beulah. Take care.
Thank you so much.